It is Friday, July 19th. This is Ryan from Sports Card Radio. You are listening to the R-rated Sports Card Podcast, not the number one sports card podcast on the internet, and not even the number two sports card podcast. In fact, you should not be listening to this podcast if you're a new collector, just getting back into the hobby, looking to be red sell sheets, or looking for Heroes of Sport promos. This podcast and even the Sports Card Radio website are not for you. Having said all that, if you're looking for some quick updates on some of the scammers, scoundrels, and trimmers in the industry, I'll try to provide a quick update for you on that. I have broken my third microphone that I've bought over the years, and it's called Some Delays in Any Kind of Podcast with My Brother. I imagine I'll try to pick up a new microphone soon, and maybe we'll get together and do a podcast around the National or around that time. My brother, doesn't work, and I believe his wife works part-time or something, and they've got 2 kids, so recording a sports card podcast, especially with all that's going on in this industry and the losers, scammers, scoundrels, and trimmers, not exactly, believe it or not exactly high on either Colin or mine's list. And believe it or not, we are actually 2 separate people, and we both live separate lives and have separate sources of income outside of the Sports Card Radio website. But every year we usually do a podcast together at the National Sports Collectors Convention that I've been attending since 2012. This year I'm not going, and actually in 2020 I don't have any interest in going. It's in Atlantic City. Unless like Pearl Jam is playing next door, there's some reason for me to go all the way over there. I don't have any interest in going to Atlantic City. Why am I not going to the National this year, especially with all this drama and all this hype and the trimmers and all this stuff, and you think, this is the perfect year to go. God, I've been going every year since 2012, and now this is the year I'm not going to go with all this build up and lead up. I just don't feel like going. Honest to God, I just don't feel like going. When it was time to start planning the trips a few weeks ago, I just didn't feel like getting on that flight. That 4-hour flight and having to come 4 hours back. And if anything that we've told you over the years on this podcast, if you've listened or you haven't, or you're just sitting there fondling your cards while you're doing this, we always tell you, do what you want. Don't listen to Topps. Don't listen to what people tell you to collect. Don't listen to Brian Gray. Don't listen to PSA and BGS. Form your own opinion. Do what you want to do. So when I woke up and it was time to start planning this trip and I don't feel like going, and every day since, I don't feel like going. And as I talk to you right now, a week or 2 weeks out or whenever it starts, I have no interest in getting on a plane and going to Chicago. Now, if it was 20 minutes up the street in Phoenix, I would go. If it was in California, I would go. If it was in Las Vegas, I would go. So that's probably the next time you'll see me at the National. So we're going to retire the National coverage, the videos, the podcast from the National, any pictures, any of that. Any of that is 100% retired, the tweets, everything. Totally retired unless I feel like going back or they change venues, and in that case it might spur my interest in going back. The other reason why I don't want to go, I don't want to directly or indirectly promote anybody in this industry. All you motherfuckers are shady. I don't want to do a 30-minute video walking through the National that gets viewed 15, 20,000 times over the course of a year or two, and promote a trimmer's table, promote a dealer who's shady, promote a company that half of their promos went to their employees, promote grading companies that can't do their job or are shady themselves. No fucking interest in promoting anyone. Period. End of story. So that's another reason why I don't want to go, and don't want to go to, frankly, any industry event, because I think you do directly or indirectly promote the category, promote the industry, promote people involved in the hobby. And I really don't know 99.999% of you guys. I don't know if you're shady or not. And I don't want to use my platform, any kind of small platform that I have. Again, you're not listening to the number 1 or number 2 or number 3 sports card podcast right now. And you can fucking turn it off at any time, and you know, don't get your tush tag in a bunch about what gets said on here. So no national this year, and really, frankly, no national in the future, because, again, until I feel like going, until it interests me again, that's when I'll go back. Some updates to the scams since our last podcast. My brother and I did a podcast, it looks like on June 10th. 6 days later, we had an exclusive story about Leaf trading cards and some promos given away at last year's National Sports Collectors Convention in Cleveland that I did attend. It looks like 2 employees got over half of the 1-of-1 cards that they gave away. They got 66 of the 120 serial numbered 1-of-1 cards that were given away as part of a promo. These guys have since graded these cards by Beckett and have sold a lot of these cards on eBay. One Baker Mayfield card sold for $500. And one of these employees that got a lot of these cards, Joe Clemens, is the guy who's caught up, if you know about this story, in the Beckett Black Label scandal. This guy literally can walk into Beckett. He was a former employee and current Leaf employee, drop off submissions and have a Black Label and Pristine 10 success that people have never seen before. So after that story broke, I got some information again about this promo. So again, 2 separate scandals involving a Leaf employee, Joe Clemens. He can get just an outrageous number of Black Label and Pristine 10 cards because he was a former Beckett employee. So that looks shady as hell. Secondly, at last year's National, he got over half of these gold serial number 1-of-1 cards that were advertised as a promotion to collectors. So he ended up getting them, and he sold them. And Brian Gray, there was some quotes from Brian Gray. If you want to go to the article, its entire title, Beware Leaf Trading Cards in SEC Scam. And if you're listening to this, you should go over to Sports Card Radio. Head on over there, check out the latest articles, or check out the homepage where we got people, names and faces on the homepage of people that we're currently investigating. Several scammers have come to light since the last podcast, 4 in total. Kevin Burge, longtime sports card scammer, been involved in forging autographs, faking patch cards, and trimming cards as far back as 2003. In addition to the card doctoring, Kevin Burge has 34 documented criminal arrests or citations, and some of these include assault by strangulation, child abuse, second degree trespassing, 2 DUIs, assault with a deadly weapon. I mean, this guy, he's white, so he's going to get 50 chances before they put him in jail. But if this was a person of color, he would not be scamming anybody anymore in the sports card world. So that's just an amazing story there. You want to go check that out again on sportscardradio.com again. And all that detective work was provided by collectors and people on the Blowout Forum and threads that originated over there. So you also want to go check out kind of the latest and greatest that's going on over there, because those guys are, cranking out the greatest hits, like it's Elton John and stuff, in the 70s and stuff. Another trimmer, this guy took a big hit. Brandon Tang, Metro Sports Cards, was called out a couple weeks ago. And he came on Blowout Forum. He's very active on there and tried to defend himself. He said, if this goes to court, I'm prepared to defend myself. But pretty soon, his talking and his answering questions dried up really quickly and ended really quickly as they begin to cut a tree outside my house. So maybe you can hear that. Brandon Tang is a former literally a former boy band member, defunct boy band member. And he recently set up at a card show, and allegedly some of his cards were, quote, stolen. And people believe that maybe he's trying to off some of his trim cards. But huge, big, long thread about Brandon Tang over on the Blowout Sports Card Forum. You're going to want to go check that out. I give a brief summary about it over on Sports Card Radio, and you can read about it there. Longtime dealer Rod Eman is another trimmer that got exposed on Blowout. He's, again, another guy over the year who has been called out for stuff. He's been called out for selling fake autographs, hundreds of fake autographs. And there's a blog called The Autograph Live that has written like 5 or 6 posts about this guy and his fake autographs. So he has been exposed for trimming several cards, really specifically from the 2017 Topps Archives Bazooka set, these mini cards that have red borders. And so they're, I think, easier for guys to trim. And this is kind of what these guys look for, to take these cards and trim them and then get them graded, in this case by PSA, and then sell them. Another trimmer got called out. This guy owns a sports card store in Chesapeake, Virginia. He is Mohawk Sports Cards, and he literally has a mohawk. And he's actually going to be set up at the National at table 619, so you can drop by and check out to see if he has any trim cards for sale. Definitely buyer beware on this one, guys. So might want to actually skip that table at the National. But there's a few, again, 4 trimmers since our last podcast have been called out. A couple other things media-wise related to the card trimming stuff has occurred. Darren Rovell had a podcast with former MLB player Paul Lo Duca. They did that on the Sirius XM radio network. I actually recorded it. It's not available in a podcast form, I don't believe, unless you're a subscriber to Sirius, because they don't do podcast, because they make you subscribe and listen in the car and all that kind of stuff. It's the satellite radio service. I actually recorded it. I have a recording of it. It's technically not legal for me to post that, but if you do check the feed in the next couple days, I might post that. It's a 2-hour podcast. Do they spend all the time talking about card trimming? No. They have some guests that I thought, especially right in the beginning, that I thought were good. And then it veers off topic. People call in and want to know about what their Randy Moss football helmet's worth and stuff. So, but might be worth listening to. You might enjoy it. And especially if you're listening to something like this, you might enjoy that. So maybe check the feed in a couple of days. I'll put it up, and I have a feeling I won't get in trouble. There was a huge Washington Post story that came out, I believe, on the 18th of July. And I've heard that we had the New York Times story that came out several weeks ago. I also heard the Wall Street Journal was working on a story, and the Washington Post. I thought maybe these things went under or got killed, but looks like this guy was just kind of working on it. He was able to confirm from 4 sources, anonymous sources, that the FBI has been asking questions and looking into the scandal and people involved. I cannot confirm or deny that Colin and I are one of those 4 people, but if you are a card trimmer or anybody found actually on the homepage of Sports Card Radio, I would be worried. I'd be very worried, because that's not good that, people, including possibly Colin and I, have been contacted, and Lord knows you don't want the things coming out of our mouth implicating you guys, considering how we feel about you guys, most of you guys listening, and basically the hobby in general. So that would be bad. But if you want to check that out, check out the Washington Post story. It's floating around. I'm sure you can find it. It's a pretty big deal. Has all this trimming stuff impacted my buying at all? No, not really at all. I've continued to buy cards on Check Out My Cards. I didn't play in that high-end game that, the PWCC sticker, the 5 is worth 1,000, but gosh, if you can get a 6, it's worth 8,000. I didn't play in that game and the grade bumps and all that kind of different stuff and the set registry, so it doesn't necessarily impact the things I do in the hobby, the buying and selling that I do, and most of what I do is really minimal, and only $10 to $20 a day at most. On Check Out My Cards. So it hasn't impacted me at all. I think it probably has impacted kind of some of the Pollyanna and some of the people who everything should be roses and sunshine in the hobby, and gosh, I'm going to give away a Jose Canseco card just to distract people from the card trimming. What these people, these fanboys and these pumpers and these guys who can't take any kind of negativity in the sports card world, what these guys don't realize, I believe, and I hope that maybe opens their eyes to this at some point. They're certainly not going to listen to this podcast, not 15 minutes in here, but I think removing the bad apples and kind of pushing the industry forward would grow the industry and take it to way new heights. If you could have computerized grading or a standardized system where you took a card and it was looked at by a computer and you got a score to 1,000, and everybody without question could understand that and could respect that, it would actually take cards to a whole new level. So for me, when I want to get more involved covering sports cards, go back to the national, promote people indirectly or directly for free, I want to do it with an industry that I really believe in, where you kind of have this, because what's going to happen is either PSA is going to come up with this new technology, BGS will or probably won't, or it'll be somebody new. I actually think it might, for the first time, be somebody new will come in. This technology is already patented. You can already actually go see somebody actually patent the technology to grade a card by a computer, and there's mock-ups and all this kind of different stuff. And I think it's from some guys in the Bay Area. But for me, what's going to happen is everybody is, PSA and BGS may at some point be looked at like GAI or these fly-by-night grading companies. Eventually, you might look at PSA and BGS like that, because somebody's going to come along with a computer that's going to be able to grade your card to 1,000-point scale and look at the fibers and look at the centering and look at all the little, things to a milli degree. And on a scale that we've never seen before, not just some Joe Blow sitting in Texas or sitting in California who looks at your card for 30 seconds and who may or may not be able to tell if it's altered or not. Well, a computer probably will. So there's going to be this kind of new gold rush to crack your, PSA and BGS will turn into GAI. And then this new company, there'll be a gold rush. Gosh, if you could have stock in them. All the fondlers, as soon as it becomes accepted and the fondlers wake up, they'll be like, oh my God, my PSA slab, my BGS slab is a GAI slab now. I've got to submit to this new company. That's what I believe will happen. That's when I want to get re-involved in the hobby, because you're going to see this kind of it's going to be a new market. Because, okay, now what are these cards worth? It's not going to be a 1 to 10 scale now. It's going to be a 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 100 or far more detailed. And you're going to have a new company or a new business model kind of sucking up all this money and having a lot of influence. And it's going to be very interesting. I can see it happening certainly in the next 5 to 10 years. It could happen at any moment if somebody wants to throw a bunch of money at it and has the technology. But that's when I want to get more involved in the hobby. I think otherwise, when you guys show off your little slabs and you're showing off stuff, PSA and BGS are just the equivalent of a fly-by-night grading company. They just have the volume. And for whatever reason, your guys' trust. And I don't know why still they may have your trust, but I guess it's because they're the only two people that you can trust right now. But I envision that changing, and that's when I'll become much more involved, kind of promoting the hobby more freely, and probably doing more podcasts on my own and so forth. But otherwise, until next time, there probably won't be another R-rated podcast for a while, but check the stream. I might upload that Darren Rovell podcast and maybe something else. But until then, check the regular Sports Card Radio podcast. Me and my brother will be back, I imagine, soon, and keep you guys updated on everything involved with all the scammers, scoundrels, and trimmers in the hobby. Until next time, this was the R-rated podcast hosted by Ryan.